Everyone, thank you for joining me. These are Day Texts with Greg Stafford, where we meet every weekday morning at 5 a.m. Pacific Standard Time so that we can consider a portion of the biblical record or other related ancient histories, sources of knowledge and wisdom that we can benefit from during our day. So, we are working our way through the New Testament. We started these day texts back in November as I was going through the book of Philippians. Previously, I had posted day texts on Twitter and on Facebook and on the Christian Witnesses of Jah discussion forum. So we started doing these videos in November, and then of course embedding the text, discussing them like we are now. So we'll continue through to the end of the New Testament with the book of Revelation, and then we will reset and start over with Genesis. So we are going to finish up our last section of verse groupings from Titus. I have not translated all of the letter of Titus, so there were only a few videos on this letter. But as we continue to go through the books and letters of the Bible, I will add to the translation so that as we go back through, then the next time around, we should have more to consider from each of the documents. All right, so today we are going to read Titus chapter 3 and verses 8 through 11. I'm going to read those texts. We'll make a brief application, talk a little bit about this Saturday's CW Jah Talk show, and then we'll be on our way. Okay. All right, Titus chapter 3, verses 8 through 11 read, "This message," the message that he's been talking about earlier in verses 4 through 7 of this chapter, "this message, is trustworthy. About such things, I want you to speak confidently, so those who have become believers in God might be concerned enough to engage in fine works." Now notice, he says those who have become believers in God might engage in fine works. So, like today, they had people back then who believed in God, but they lacked the confidence or the motivation to regularly engage in fine works. And so he's saying, look, speak about this message confidently so that the people who already believe, but who may be weak or unmotivated, will engage in fine works. And then let's read the rest of verse 8. "Such things are beautiful and valuable to humans." And there are a lot of activities today that just aren't that valuable. They may be recreational, they may have some joy, but what do you think of when you think of value? You think of something retaining a benefit that you can use when you need it. So keep that in mind. Let's read the rest of the text. "On the other hand," verse 9, "you must avoid idiotic questions, genealogies, arguments, and fights over laws, for they are hurtful and of no value." This must be, again, the fifth or sixth, maybe even the seventh time, because I believe he even mentioned something similar yesterday in yesterday's text, that Paul says to stop fighting and to avoid arguments and idiotic questions. And what do we see today from so many people? Not just people who criticize Christianity, but in fact, I would say probably even more so, those who claim to believe in Christianity. Trinitarians, anti-Trinitarians, all they seem to want to do, many of them, not all of them, is engage in these ongoing questions about things they either don't know anything about because it's metaphysical, or they're trying to bring their belief developed hundreds of years after the Bible back to the Bible and then create arguments and debates about it. That's exactly what we're not supposed to do. So any belief like the Trinity that would create these kinds of fights and it couldn't be biblical. That it's not only not biblical because we know that it's not defined in the Bible the way the Trinity is defined historically. Biblical teachings do not create fights. People create fights over biblical teachings. So one God the Father, very simple, straightforward. We get it. Sons of God are gods too because they were created by Jah, they're in the Spirit, and they have the same type of being that he has and reflect only his will if they serve him. We get it. Okay? They tell them they represent Jah, they speak for Jah. So there's only one God, but they can represent that one God and in effect be that God. That's what the Bible teaches. It's not that hard. We don't need to get into these ongoing arguments over what it just tells us. And if we do need to get into an argument, why not use the very argument that Jesus himself used, John 10? Again, I'm talking a little bit about the Trinity, but that's not the only issue over which people fight. People will fight over the law. People will fight over the Sabbath. They'll argue over chronology, all these things. I'm so happy to be a Christian witness of Jah. 3 things, that's it. You want to burden your life and the lives of others with other issues and questions, that's up to you. I say don't do it. I say pursue things that have value. Let's go back to the text and finish it here. I wanted to stop there because of this repeated instruction to stop fighting. And yet, so many people ignore this instruction as if Paul never says it. And he says it's over and over again, really. All right, let's finish up with verses 10 and 11. You must refuse to hear a person who causes division after a first and a second warning, right, at the mouth of 2 or 3 witnesses. So in this case, though, it's a warning, and there's a different type of situation here than just someone who's being accused with evidence. This is someone who's actively causing division. So it's not quite the same scenario where you need to wait 2 or 3 times. Here he's saying just after a first and second warning, well, that's 2, and then the 3rd time you ignore them. So it's still consistent with that principle. But here, when you have someone who's actively causing division, what do? They come into an area and they start to argue the very things he just said not to do in verse 9. So when you see a so-called Christian, I don't care who they are background-wise, Trinitarian, Jehovah's Witness, whatever, if they're doing these things, they are not a Christian. Unless they are trying to help a person here or there, or there's an important topic or issue, maybe there's a show, that's different. The whole forum is set up around questions then. I'm talking about how when, remember one time I did a show on love? I did a C.W. Jaw Talk show on love. And in the questions, I was getting people wanting me to talk about Sharp's rule, a Greek grammatical rule having to do with the controversy about whether Jesus is called God. And so that's really what I'm talking about, right? Someone who would totally avoid the defined theme for a Christian show, love, and try to steer that off the cliff into an argument about a Greek grammatical rule whose application makes no difference as far as I'm concerned, whether Jesus is called God or not. In texts like Titus 2:13, we still accept him as God in the sense that he represents the Father as the Son of God, the Son of God. So that's an example I'll never forget, because clearly the person's mind was nowhere near the idea of love. And anything having to do with love, that person was going to try to change into a debate. You stay away from those kinds of people. Cut them off immediately. Right? They are only there to provide something hurtful and of no value. It says right here, they fight over laws for they are hurtful and of no value. And if they keep doing that, if they won't listen, they don't stop coming in and disrupting your situation just so they can debate with you and argue with you, not over a legitimate question you haven't talked to them about before, but over something that you've talked about over and over and over again, they still want to argue with you about it, you should immediately remove yourself from their presence. You're not going to have any kind of valuable discussion. They're not there to provide you with any benefit. They're there to waste your time about things you've already discussed. So you're not going to get any value from that kind of person. And you're going to help them by avoiding them so that they reflect on what they really should be doing. Okay, let's read the last verse today. Verse 11, chapter 3. Because as you have learned, such a person who causes division, as in verse 10, has been turned away and is doing what is wrong. As one who is self-condemned. See, you don't need to say anything to that person. They're condemning themselves by directly ignoring what they claim to believe. The Apostle Paul's writings, where he over and over again says not to fight, not to argue, not to debate. They don't listen. They don't care because they don't believe. And they're only really there to cause disruptions. You have to be able to recognize those people. And they've been turned away. You know, the people who argue, debate, and try to turn every discussion into one of those things, they're not believers. They've been turned away. And if you don't believe me, it says right here, if you believe the texts, because their minds are not able to concentrate on the great message. They're only stimulated by arguments and debates over spiritual things, which really means they're not spiritual at all, because it's not a spiritual thing to regularly want to debate with somebody else whom you are supposed to be showing love to and or assisting in whatever way you can. Again, unless you're dealing with someone like Alexander the metalworker or opposers, people we have to deal with here and there, I'm not talking about that. We all know those are situations we have to address. We have to deal with those people. Sometimes we have to stand up and present the truth. Great, let's do it. But always on a show about love? You want to talk about Sharp's rule? Give me a break. Get out of here. That's not appropriate. And in fact, it's disrespectful. And if you're older than 15 years old and you're acting that way, maybe you should move back in with your parents and try to get a better education on how to become a better person. Because wherever you're getting it, you haven't gotten it. If you're an older adult and you want to interrupt a discussion about love to debate a Greek grammatical rule, it seems entirely inappropriate to me in every way, and it's surprising that anyone would think that would be acceptable. Okay, so that type of person is self-condemned, it says right there, and we can understand that, because they're refusing to do what they know is right. It's not like it's a mystery. This isn't like the Trinity, something difficult to understand. It's very clear. Just don't do these things. Stop arguing with people, fighting over words. Present the message. Believe. Tell people what you actually believe and why. Historical reasons that show Jesus existed, the things he taught, the things he did, how the whole world changed after he came. There's so much we can talk about and share with others rather than fight and argue. And that doesn't mean there won't be disagreements, even with people we're trying to reach. That's okay. People can disagree. But idiotic questions, fights, arguments, that's different than a person asking you a question while you're trying to explain to them what you believe. We expect people to ask questions. That's how they're going to better understand what we're talking about. But I'm not talking about those kinds of people. I'm talking about a person who, for example, you're trying to present the great message or just have an interchange of encouragement, and they want to hear your arguments for who the firstborn is. You see what I'm saying? They'll change the whole subject and topic just to get you off of a spiritual aspect of your faith and get you to think in a debating mode, an argument mode, anti-Trinitarian mode. That's exactly what you don't want. You don't want someone disrupting your peace of mind when you're trying to praise Jah and give honor to Jesus and show love to humans. They want to pull your mind into a debate mode over a question that they've been asking for 15 or more years. Why don't they go answer the question to those people? Yet they want to keep hearing other people argue about the subject that they don't really even believe in. So I'm not going to waste my time with those people, and I avoid them as much as possible because they are a waste of time, hurtful, and no value. They offer nothing of encouragement. And that's exactly what Paul says right here. That's why he's telling Titus and why he told Timothy, don't do these things. Watch out for these people. This is what they're going to do. And so they were dealing with many of the same things that we were. It should be no surprise then that we have the same types of people doing some of the very same things that were happening back then. Remember these things. Again, it's probably the 5th, 6th, maybe 7th, or maybe more times, 7, 8 times, if you count all the little references he makes, to not argue, to not fight. And I'm going to keep saying the same things. I will debate where necessary, and I'll present the truth where I think it's going to be effective. But if you think I'm going to get involved in every argument that comes my way or change a discussion from love to Sharp's rule, you're in the wrong place. And you should probably rethink what you're doing, because I don't think it's a good use of your time. But either way, people have to choose. And if they're not going to stop asking idiotic questions, it's our job to stop responding to them. Okay, so that's today's day text. We'll wrap up Titus, and then on Monday, we wrapped up Titus basically until I translate more. But on Monday, we'll start the letter to the Hebrews, which has a lot of good information as well. So this Saturday's CW Jaw Talk show, as we talked about yesterday, it's going to be Who is Lucifer? And the title will be a little bit more involved, and I'm going to put it up here after we're done, probably within the next half hour, as a pending live stream for tomorrow. So join me then if you have any questions about Lucifer, Luciferianism. We'll talk about some related texts, like the one where Jesus describes Satan as fallen like lightning from heaven. We'll talk about that. And other texts that have to do with spirits, some things involving Nimrod and other things from that time, and how they have developed into some of our beliefs today related to Lucifer. So join me tomorrow, and if you have any questions, make sure you post them. We'll interact, we'll talk for about an hour and go over everything we can to answer the question, who is Lucifer? And then this way you'll all be better prepared to talk about it with people, or to recognize the things that people who worship Lucifer, who honor Lucifer, do. And then you can decide how you want to deal with them or whether to avoid them. Either way, everyone must make their own decisions, but we try to provide helpful information in these day texts and in our other shows so that you're prepared to deal with whatever it is that you face each day. All right, so until then, or I should say until tomorrow, 8:30 CW Jaw Talk Show, I hope you all have a wonderful Friday, and may Jah bless you in Jesus' name. Thank you.